monetary policy, talking about monetary policy tools. So specifically things along the lines of open market operations, the interbank lending rates, also known as overnight wholesale cash rates, also known as discount rates, also known as interbank lending rates. There's a variety of terms for them. They all mean the same thing. And obviously, I mean, we talked about jawboning as a possible extra, but it's not, necessarily vital in there. And this idea of quantitative easing was where we were at. And we talked about quantitative easing, about it being a direct injection of money, all right? So if I'm not mistaken, I think, Sharaf, you've got a really good answer with this here, right? Yes, so a push of money directly into the money supply from the central banks, usually, right, into the money supply using the bond market, where the central bank is actually buying up those bonds, right, buying up those securities. And the example that we used, which is where this quantitative easing kind of came into its own, was after the global financial crisis. And the scary part of that was that there seemingly was no limit to what they were going to be buying up. So there you see $2.1 trillion purchased of bonds between 2008 and 2010. So over 2 years, that's how much they bought. So the idea being is that obviously would expand the money supply by $2.1 trillion. Right? So that's what Sharaf found the other day, which was very, very good. All right. Now, close that one. Now, moving on from there, we need to consider this. Look at this beastie. Check this one out. This is known in your textbook as the money market. Now, under previous... Yeah, hello.
I think you're not sharing your screen.
Well, that's not very nice of me.
It's all good, though.
I tell you, you'll have to tell me off. Mr. David, share your screen. All right, should be sharing now. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So this little wee beastie is called the money market. Now, under your previous syllabus, we didn't really look at the money market particularly. Under your current syllabus, yes, we do. All right. Now, it's a market, right? It has a supply and it has a demand. Only in this case, you're talking about the market actually for money, right? So you've got an MS label on this curve here, and you've got an MD label on this curve here. Now, you're all rocket scientists, so you're going to be able to tell me that MS stands for what?
Money supply.
Well done, money supply, whereas MD is going to stand for?
Money demand.
Money demand, absolutely right. Well done. So this money market has supply and demand, and then it has an intersection between the supply and demand, like any other market. And that intersection, we're going to, rather confusingly, we're going to use the letter R, I know, all right? And in some books, it's going to be a small r. Other books, it's going to be a capital R, all right? So they're using a capital R at economicshelp.org, all right? So here we see an R2 and an R1. All right, so the R is going to be the interest rate. All right, so by doing this particular expansion of the money supply, see we've gone from MS1 to MS2, so money supply 1 to money supply 2, the quantity of money available has actually increased. And as that happens, we've actually moved down the money demand curve and thereby decreased the interest rate. That's the interest rate there that is impacting on people when they're making decisions about whether to buy goods and services or not. You know, getting into credit, but it's also impacting on people's decisions about whether to save money or not. Right? Because that idea of interest rates is kind of like the opportunity cost of holding money. Right? Okay. So that is the money market. It's not overly complicated. I mean, quite clearly you can see that the money supply curve is perfectly inelastic. Now I'm going to stop sharing just now and then jump to the meet and then jump to the chat. Now, anybody tell me, why do you think the money supply curve in the money market model is perfectly inelastic? What do you think? What does it tell us?
Does it mean that there is a less responsive change to money supply? Yeah.
Yes, it will. Right? If it's perfectly inelastic, there isn't a response at all, is there? So it's going to be completely unresponsive. But what else does it tell us? Why do you think it's perfectly inelastic? What's the point of it?
That it does not have any connection with the interest rate. They will keep on going without being affected by the interest rate, really.
Yeah, so it's not responsive, absolutely. Yeah. Why do you think it isn't responsive? I'm trying not to tell you the answer, I'm trying to get you to think of it. They can, Arena, gosh, you're treading on the right answer there. They can only provide a certain amount. Who specifically are we talking about? Who's the they, Arena? Who makes money? The government, yeah? The central bank. So therefore it's perfectly inelastic because they only make a certain amount. That's it. That's the amount. Remember we had the equation? Do you remember the equation? Yeah. MV equals PQ, that one. All right. Where we said that the money supply here, right, that's the quantity of money available in the economy. If you multiply it by the velocity that it moves around the circular flow model, then it is equal to the price level multiplied by the level of output. So if the level of output was fixed, right, predetermined in a way, then the only thing that's going to change is your inflation rate. So assuming that velocity is fixed and constant, then if we start increasing the money supply, then inflation is going to. So the way to control inflation there, as we said, was to control the money supply. So the way to control the money supply is to have one lot of people making it. Other reason why you want to have only one lot of people making it is because you don't want a whole lot of random people wandering around with, I don't know, Joel dollars, right? Max dollars, Wen Hao dollars. We don't want those, all right? We figure they're not worth quite as much, maybe, or maybe they're worth more. All right, let's jump back in. So central bank is the only authority with regards to the issue of currency at the moment. So here's what I'd like you to do. There's a access there on your screen. Have a go. I know it's difficult because of the computer and all, but have a go illustrating the effect of an expansion of the money supply. There you go. Oh, good work. Keep going, team. Nice work, Nisa. Good work, Arena. Oh, we've all got it. Look at that. Brilliant. Yes, I'm looking at the labels, making sure the labels are right. Making sure you have the inelastic supply curve. Well done, team. Keep going. Got about another 30 seconds.
Way back here.
All right, let's have a look, see what we've got here. Oh, fantastic, look at that. Good work, Sharaf. Yeah, we seem to have got it. That's really good. Darwin, make sure you're putting the labels on as well. The supply curve in particular. Very good. Well done, team. Okay, so the idea is that you've got an expansion of the money supply. So you should be illustrating that with the money supply curve, which is perfectly an elastic one, shifting to the right. Yes, showing it with an arrow is useful as well, potentially. Good, but you've also got the labels, so MS1 and MS2, or MS and MS1. You can do that as well, that's absolutely fine. You can also do MS0 and MS1 if that's easier for you, or potentially do MS dash and MS dash dash. Then up to you as to how you do it. All right, interest rate has fallen because of the increase in the money supply. And of course, if interest rates fall, then we would expect people to be more than prepared to borrow money to spend. Yes, I know we aren't saying by how much it's falling or any of those sorts of things, okay? We would expect people to take on more credit, and therefore more consumption would happen, maybe more interest rates, more investment. What's happening? There we go. Maybe more investment might happen because investments are now more affordable as well. And so that would then improve the overall state of the productivity of the economy as well as we go forward. So that's fantastic. Well done, team. It also might reduce the willingness people have to save, because if the interest rates are now lower, they're getting less return on their savings. So kind of a double whammy effect. Right. Now, the demand for money, what is it? Right, so it's that downward sloping curve. Now, there are a couple of aspects to this. The demand for money is the consumers holding money, not saving it, but using it then to pay for their consumption and their current expenditure. So we say that the opportunity cost of holding that money is therefore the interest rate. Right? Now, there are two types of demand for money. Okay, there is what's called transactional demand, which is when you are holding money to buy goods and services. Then there's another which is called speculative demand, and that's more about you're holding on to the money as an asset. So like the people are doing at the moment with the Bitcoin and the Ethereum and the Dogecoin, etc. All of those groups of people are holding on to those presumably as an asset as opposed to using them to buy goods and services. So either way, they're going to be impacted by the interest rate and therefore opportunity cost, okay? Because they're holding on to the money. So whether they're holding on to it to buy goods and services or whether they're holding on to it because the value is changing, therefore it's worth to them as an asset, really doesn't matter because they're still holding the money. It's not in their bank account, so they aren't earning that interest rate. So what was money demand again? Well done, Padma. Good. Graph. Yes, absolutely. Well done, Arena. See you getting this. It's great. This money market concept was quite debatable. It was quite, there is aspects to it that even today economists are going to be a bit when they're attempting to explain it. So if there are tricky questions about the money market, feel free to ask them or not, right, as the case may be, because you might not necessarily like the answer that I give you which is simply that. Yeah, it kind of just has to, what it does. Yes, well done, go on. Yes, absolutely, say on. Is Joel in today, Joel D? He's going to answer down for us. Right, wait another couple of seconds to see if Joel D can put an answer in. There we go. Yes, well done. Yeah, at higher interest rates, people might prefer to save the money as opposed to hold. Try and avoid using the word hold because that's, again, it's that, it's difficult to say, but the idea of holding money suggests it's not in your bank account, right? So therefore, you're not technically saving it. I know you haven't currently spent it, and there's, again, one of the reasons why the money market can be a bit complicated, right? Because in theory, the money that you have in your hand hasn't been spent, but it also currently isn't being saved in a traditional sense.
Yeah, I see. All right. Okay.
Okay, now, what about the supply of money? Well, as we've already worked out, the supply of money is the amount of money, right? It is produced by the central bank. It is created perhaps through their printing presses, although these days normally through computing, right? The total amount of money in the economy, it includes the banknotes, it includes the coins, it includes deposits in banks. They might be term deposits, right? Which means that they're held within the bank for a period of time, right? So we're talking more about the slightly more than the normal, just everyday understanding, what's called M1, right? So we're talking about a little bit bigger of a universe of money. And we're talking about all of the loans that have been made and the amount of credit, say through credit cards or store cards or hire purchase agreements. All of those are actually classified within that universe of money. So therefore, if interest rates, well, sorry, not if interest rates, if the supply of money increases, then we would expect to see, based on our money market model, we would expect to see the interest rates decrease, okay? So if there's more money in the market, if that perfectly inelastic supply curve shifts to the right, we would expect to see it track down the demand for money curve, decreasing the rate of interest. Yes, I know there are fixed rates of interest, and I know people are going to be tied into deposits at certain rates. I know all of that, but what we're saying is that in general, the interest rates will actually fall. Then if you've got a decrease in the supply of money, so in this case, the supply of money curve will be going to the left, tracking up the money demand curve, you would expect then to see the interest rates rise if that is the case. So all up, there's quite a bit that's going on there just with that money market model. It's not hugely complicated. It is just a market model. In that sense, some of the applications of it as we work our way through it can be a little bit more complicated. And yes, we've got to take into account the real world as well, right? We've got to take into account weirdnesses like the Bitcoins and the Ethereums and the sort of asset class of money, right? Such as it is, okay? So we've got to take all of that in the real world, we've got to take all of that into account, and the idea of fixed deposits and fixed interest rates and all of those other sorts of things. That all happens too. Right? Now, what was money supply again?
Okay. Fish.
Total amount of money in the economy. Yeah, okay, we'll cope with that at this point, Max. We might need to be a bit more specific as we go forward, but all right. Now, money, yes, there we go. Well done, Fatima. Banknotes, bank deposits, loans, and credit. Yes, well done. Absolutely. Yep, good, Dawan. Again, as we go forward, adding in a little bit more detail is helpful. Okay. Yes, that's the one. Yes, well done. Yes, indeed. Well done, Joel. Right. So that's what we're after. Right. We need as much clarity as we can get in some of these definitions, because we're going to run into real world problems when we're applying them. So we need to make sure that we have mentioned things like the bank deposits, the bank notes, the coins, the credit, the loans, because there will be aspects of our economy that aren't therefore included within the traditional idea of a money supply. Okay, and therefore we're going to run into some problems with the implications as to what that might mean. We're also got to be considering that we are evaluating monetary policy. So we need to know that how does monetary policy work, as we've just explained, okay, and whether it will then be effective. Well, we've talked about time lags, we've talked about people's behaviour, and whether their behaviour will actually follow the theoretical pattern, right? We've talked about political influence and all of these other sorts of things that might crop in, right, particularly if it is a politically unpopular opinion. We've also mentioned things like the liquidity trap that might prevent certain tools from being used or used as effectively as we once used them. So maybe newer tools like the quantitative easing might be more appropriate. Now, if I jump back here to meet. Now, here's what we need you to be thinking about. I need you to be working through, please, on your IAC2. I need you to start working on that initial submission you possibly already have, right? And if you have questions as you go through it, right, and you want some clarity, please email me, right? And that way I can give you some feedback before you submit it. Now, the reason why I say that is because there were a couple who weren't as pleased, weren't as happy. Okay, son.
It's fish, no, Dad.
That
Fish.
is. Right. And that's a little fishy, son. Now,
I'm a big fish.
all right, we did the Finding Nemo joke yesterday. So they're all happy with that
Yay.
because we found him. So therefore, he's not lost. All right. Yes, indeed. Yes, Joel, you can. Now, so I'm wanting you to, because there were a couple of learners who didn't get as high an average for their IAC1 initial submission as they would have liked. We need to make sure that you get a really good IAC2. I know it's your initial submission, but we need that average potentially to be up. You need to get at least the same result for your IAC2 initial submission as you got for your IAC1, otherwise it drags your overall average down. You're aware of that because of averages, the law of averages.